Right. So thank you very much for inviting me. I wasn't aware that I was the first person in this seminar series, so I'm feeling very honoured indeed. So thank you. And I'm also very interested to hear about the Centre for Digital Humanities. I mean, that's often stuff that I think we need more of. So yeah, I'm not planning on talking the entire length of time because I really do want to kind of open this up as a discussion, questions and answers type thing, and just get the conversation started, because basically that's what I'm interested in. So the talk is titled Frontiers of Data Publishing, and I don't know about everybody else, but when I start thinking about frontiers of data publishing, I start thinking about either Star Trek and Space: The Final Frontier, or possibly a bit more like the Wild West, where we're not entirely sure what's going on, but we're still trying to expand out into a new area and learn what's there and learn how best to work with it. Hopefully without the associated problems that happened with the Wild West and colonialization and all sorts of nastiness there. But we've learned a lot from the past, I hope, so that'll be good. But anyway, it's quite a broad subject to talk about, data publishing, and I've been talking about it for many years. So if people have heard me talk before, I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But I hope what I'm able to say and talk about is of interest, and yeah, please do feel free to jump in with questions, comments, anything at all really. So the first question I have is a question to basically everybody. Why do we publish our work in the first place? Why do we sit down? Why do we do research? And then why do we publish it? And I think the main reason we do that is so that other people can read our work, understand what we've done, and build on it. And the reason we do it in the form of written word and publishing, or via talks on the internet or whatever, is because it's just not physically possible, especially nowadays, to actually go and talk to people one-on-one. Writing articles is a very, well, I was going to say very efficient. It's a reasonably efficient way of communicating what it is we've done with somebody who's halfway around the world in a different time zone, and who wants to be learning what we've done in their own time and space. So it's all about communication. So we publish our work to communicate it, to share it, and that's basically the fundamental that I think that we have to remember. And also, we've got to remember as well that it does take a lot of time and effort and energy and work to build stuff, to build the conclusions that we're talking about, to actually do the research work that we want to be sharing. And as the picture there says, it takes work to build a masterpiece, and yes, it absolutely does. So I started as a physicist way back in my undergraduate days. And then I moved into doing research work in radio propagation research, and then into environmental sciences data management. And through that's how I kind of got into data publication, data citation, that sort of thing. And I think when we're talking about publishing, in terms of academic publishing and also data publication, we have to remember that as well as communicating our research, publication is all about recording what it is we've done so other people can reproduce it and understand it. Basically, science should be reproducible. Other people doing the same experiments in the same way should get the same results. Now, this is often a difficult thing to achieve, but it's something that we should be aiming for anyway. So when I was working in environmental science, we were doing lots of work with observational data, and observational data is not reproducible. You can't nip back to last Monday to take a measurement that you forgot to make at the time. It just doesn't work like that if you're measuring climate or weather or anything like that. So we've got to store and manage properly our observational data that has been recorded in the past, because we can't go back to the past to replace it if we lose it. For all science, or an awful lot of science, there's always edge cases, but we researchers and people who want to evaluate the research that's presented in a journal article need to have access to the data to confirm the science is valid. And as I'm sure everybody's seen over the past year, we've seen a wide rash of poor data analysis that generates false facts that are spread around the world very, very quickly. And those undermine science and its credibility, and also potentially really, really hurt people. I'm thinking of, in particular, the stuff with chloroquine as a treatment for COVID, and how and bleach as well, and how that was promoted as a way of dealing with COVID, and that was bad science, poor data analysis, and false facts that just got spread around everywhere. So basically, when we are talking about data publication, we're doing it for a couple of purposes: to validate the scientific record, to make sure that it's secure, and also to share what it is we've done and communicate what we've done with other people as well. So, scientific publication. Data publication used to be easy in inverted commas because we didn't, historically speaking, we didn't have an awful lot of data. So that data could be captured as a drawing or as a table, and they're both the couple of examples there are very old, but they still serve to illustrate the point. I mean, the mimosa leaves there diagram from Robert Hooke's Micrographica, that dates all the way back to 1665, which is a long time ago, but it's still data, it still counts. As are the observations of stars in the spiral nebula table there that come from the papers of William Parsons, the 3rd Earl of Ross, back in the 1800s. That was all well and good when it was hard to get data and you only had limited amounts of it. Now we're in the situation where we have vast quantities of data, and it's in our everyday lives, not even as scientists or researchers, we are creating data with every like we click and every website we visit, and every time we set foot out of the door with our GPS on or our location tagging on. And this is vast quantities of data. And here in these pictures, we've got the photos of the hard copy of the human genome at the Wellcome Collection in London. So this is a literal printout and book-bound entirety of the whole human genome. And as you can see, that's a very large bookcase there with very big books and very heavy books on very thin paper with very small text. This is a fascinating artifact as far as I'm concerned when it comes to kind of talking about data. It's also almost completely useless if you want to do any research on the human genome, because no human can possibly read all of that, store it in their brain, and actually manage to do anything with it. That's why we need computers, right? Okay, I can't actually, just for notice, I can't actually see if any chat or anything questions are popping up. So we'll because of the way the slides are being shown. So hopefully we'll catch them all at the end. So oftentimes when you start talking about data publication, you start getting into discussions about the difference between open data, closed data, what it actually means when you publish something or make it unpublish or share it or whatever. And there's lots of subtleties that people can get quite confused about. I think the important thing here to remember is that you can publish stuff and have it closed. You can publish stuff and have it open. You can have stuff that is shared and open, by which I mean it's available on a website, but it hasn't had that extra quality control or checking, which adds value to the consumer. So the text down there at the bottom right is publishing, and I've underlined the capital P for publishing, is basically making something public after some formal process which adds value for the consumer. So in the case of academic publishing, so you write a paper, you stick it up on a preprint server or on your personal website, right? That is publishing with a small p, or possibly sharing, but there has been no peer review of that preprint, And if it's just on a personal website or uploaded to Twitter or something like that, there's not necessarily a commitment to persistence, right? So there's this access of persistence, openness, and quality control and checking, which are all kind of in with the way of thinking about publishing data sets and code as well. I'll generally talk about data, but this does include all other stuff that is created digital, like code and workflows and the like. Okay, so of course we can say, well, why do we want to publish our data? Why do we want to make it open anyway? Fundamentally, I think it's the right thing to be doing, because by ensuring that that data is open and accessible, it means that it's verifiable. It means that the results that are derived from that particular data set are able to be accessed and checked and double checked, and that's really important for the scientific record. There's also other factors, like the fact that if you have publicly funded research, the public kind of need to know what it is their money's paid for, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. It's but at the same time, we need to make sure that the researcher who've put their kind of time and effort and emotional and intellectual energy into creating these things, they get attribution and credit for their work, because that's important. Sharing data, data science techniques, that's good for the economy too, if new industries can be built on scientific data and research. And as I said before repeatedly, it's all about that scientific reproducibility, scientific verifiability as well. And of course, we don't want to be doing this in isolation. We need reward structures and incentives for researchers to encourage them to make their data open and also to publish those. And I think more researchers are, oops, that's moved on automatically. Wasn't expecting that. I think more researchers understand what they mean by publishing, because people are used to publishing articles. Of course, you do have the situation of you get quotes like this, where it's somebody will say, I'm all for the free sharing of information, provided it's them sharing their information with us. And I'm sure this is not uncommon if you're a librarian or a research data manager. You'll have heard this thing before. So just to be clear that I'm not quoting anyone actually real, the quote that this comes from a Terry Pratchett book, and it's the Arch Chancellor of the Unseen University on the Discworld. So it's a common thing that I've seen expressed, but it's not. I'm not directly attributing anybody in real life, so to speak. Right. You'll also see. Oops, no, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. You'll also see people worried about getting scooped. They will go, I can't possibly make my data open or available because I'll get scooped. Other people will publish about it first and I won't get any credit. I will put my hand on my heart and say, yes, this actually did happen to me, and I'm happy to talk about it, perhaps as part of the question and answers later on. But I will. On one hand, it didn't really impact my scientific work. On the other hand, it completely changed the course of my career, in the fact that once I got scooped, I started getting very interested in how you do this data credit and attribution thing. And that led me into a number of projects, which eventually wound up with me becoming editor-in-chief of Patterns. But I can talk about that later on. The thing is, if you're encouraging people to publish their data as part of a journal article or in a repository or something like that, the problems with getting scooped get minimized a little bit, or they get minimized a bit, because the act of publishing the data set involves defining that the authors are responsible for the data set and gives them the credit they deserve. You also get the situation of this. I love the Lego academics, they're great. But people get quite annoyed, and rightly so, about having research results posted online without proper attribution. We like having attribution. It's important to us. It's not only for in terms of job searches and CVs and all the rest of it, but also it's important for our sense of selves as researchers. And that's something that we need to be aware of. And as I said, publishing data gives that appropriate attribution and credit to people. Okay. So when people talk about data, you start hearing things about the FAIR data principles, and I'm sure most of you have already come across this, but just in case. When we're talking about FAIR, we're talking about making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, right? And this is a kind of framework and guidance for making data available and publishing it. You'll notice in there, however, that nowhere does it say that the data has to be open. It just has to be findable and accessible. And that those accessibility restrictions could vary according to whether or not what sort of person you are who wants to access the data, whether or not you have the appropriate training or background or rights to be able to do so. And so then that begs the question of, well, how do we publish data, or how do we make our data open, or how do we make our data fair? And there's lots of different technologies available to do this at this point in time. And all of them have various pluses or minuses. So, I mean, at the most simple level, you can simply stick your data set up on a web page somewhere. But as anyone who's ever had a project website set up and then has to manage it and the project funding has come to an end will realize that web pages aren't entirely that persistent. And also they can be difficult to manage. And also, although it's less of a problem nowadays with Google, discoverability can be quite tricky as well. It can be hard actually to discover data sets that are just stuck up on a web page too. And oftentimes it's better to put them in a trusted repository. Okay, so you can also, as well as sticking it up on a website, you could stick it up on the cloud, and that also has problems potentially with stability, persistence, and discoverability. Journal papers often allow you to attach a data set as supplementary materials, and that works quite well because you've got the persistence guarantee there with the supplementary information. The issue then becomes, oh yeah, you can also find the data set easily enough if you know that it's been attached to, sorry about that. And you know that it's been attached to the paper. The issue there is how reusable it becomes and how interoperable it becomes. So that is something you have to bear in mind. Putting the data set into repositories, institutional or discipline-specific repositories are always good. There are plenty of general repositories out there where you can upload your data for free and tag it, and they do provide persistence. Discipline-specific repositories are also very good with helping with the interoperable and reusable side of parts of FAIR, which is handy. And then, of course, then the last point is you can write a data article about it and publish it in a journal or a data specific journal, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So basically, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse wiggling around at all. I don't know, but anyway, I think I hope everybody's pretty up to speed about the publication process. The author writes a journal, writes an article and submits it to the journal. And there's not necessarily any links to the data set, but the reviewer then reviews the article and the data is somewhere. It could be on a CD in a desk drawer or whatever. We're wanting to move away from that, so that we're moving to the situation where the author still submits their article to the journal, but within that article there are links to the description of the data in either a institutional repository or in a discipline-specific repository, or in a general data repository. And then now that link is made between the data set in the repository and the article itself, the reviewer can review the data paper, can review the article, and also have a look at the data set too. And some journals, Patterns included, have taken this one step further, and we've instigated this thing called a descriptor article. And basically, a descriptor article is where the article describes a data science output, a data science thing, which could be a data set, software code, description of an infrastructure, hardware, e-infrastructure, whatever, and that is that data science output object is of use to the data science community. And that is really handy for people who have spent 2 years, many years, working on creating a data set, which is really valuable and of use. But because they haven't done any analysis, they don't necessarily have the novel results that are required for a lot of academic publications. But at the same time, this data set or output that they've created is incredibly valuable from the point of view of the research community. So descriptor articles allow researchers to publish these things and get credit for them because they so very much deserve it. And they also allow journals and people to peer review the output. They also allow the publication of negative results. You can publish the output as more quickly because it doesn't require analysis. The output is published as is. And you can get, again, attribution and credit for the data collectors, the software developers, which is really important, as I said. And it also is easier to help find data sets and software, understand what the data science output is and how it can be used, and also have guarantees about the output's quality and provenance as well. I mentioned about openness not being directly part of the FAIR principles, and my general rule of thumb for dealing with data publication and openness is go with as open as possible and as closed as necessary. So the vast majority of data should be open, but there's always going to be edge cases and always going to be situations where you can't make data open because there are confidentiality issues. This is medical data and it's uniquely identifying individuals. It could be conservation issues, maps of the locations of rare animals or plants at risk from poachers. We don't want to make that open. Or there could be security issues. It could be data and methodologies for building biological weapons, or for hacking or whatever, hacking computer systems. So it's a matter of kind of thinking about those edge cases rather than trying to do the blanket situation. We often have the 80-20 rule, so 80% of the situation we can cover with one area of guidelines, whereas 20% of the edge cases will always have to require a bit more thought. I can say, however, that even for closed data sets, where, for example, you're looking at a medical database and the people are uniquely identified, you can still make information and metadata about that data set open, even if you can't make the entire data set open. And that's really helpful because it allows people to go and have an idea about what the data set actually contains and how it's been validated and how it's been looked at without actually having to dive into the details of what the data set contains. That metadata is really useful and really important, and I think in general all data sets need to have good quality metadata, because metadata allows us to understand what's going on in the data set, but it also gives us proxies for trust. So because data sets aren't generally particularly human readable, they're massive tables full of numbers and things like that, they're very hard to understand and get a feeling for whether or not the data in them is valid. When you read a journal paper, it's written in English. It's usually pretty easy to read and get a quick understanding of the quality of the paper. But you don't want to be downloading multiple gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes of data set to open it and actually have a prod in it and see if it's any use to you. So you can use proxies for the quality, and one of those proxies is there enough metadata so that you can understand and or use the data, and you can check that first without having to actually prod into the data set itself. Another proxy for data quality is do you know the creators of the data set? Do you know the data source? Do you know the repository it's stored in? Do you trust that source or that repository? And those are important questions. And just in the same way that not all journal publishers are created equal, not all data repositories are created equal either. And of course, there's good metadata and bad metadata. And the good metadata is generally stuff that's detailed and standardized and easy to read. And then you also get the less than good metadata, which an example of which I've given there, where there's a published data set, and there's the citation to it in the dry digital repository there, and that 3 short lines in the use.me or in the readme file was the entirety of the metadata for that particular data set. And as you can see, it's not really an awful lot there. I mean, they do get plus points for giving you the date range, but I'm not entirely sure where Marysville, Victoria is. I think it's probably somewhere in Australia, but latitude and longitude would have been helpful. Anyway, I will not get into the nitty-gritty details of that. Just as I was saying about openness and closed, I mean, this quote here is from an absolutely excellent blog post, which is talking about how people can make their data open in inverted commas and yet make it absolutely unfindable, unaccessible, definitely not interoperable, and completely unreusable, if unreusable is actually a word. And basically, so it's a way people can comply to funders' mandates and things like that without actually comply to the letter of the mandate without actually complying to the spirit of it. And it's important to think, I mean, that's why I think FAIR is so useful a framework for thinking about data publication, because it is taking into account the fact that, yes, people can make their data open, but if it's not usable or not understandable, then why have they bothered? It's a bit of a waste of their time and effort. Talking about open access as well, you can cite something even when it's not open. Again, you can publish something, you can publish a data set even if that data set is not open. Just like you can cite a paper that's behind a paywall, you can cite a data set that isn't open. Making something citable, so publishing it, means that people know it exists, people know who's responsible for it, who created it, readers know where to find it, and users and readers know about a bit about it and its metadata, title, abstracts, creators, dates. And even if you can't necessarily download or read the thing yourself, that means you can still understand what's there, and there's still guarantees of persistence and quality control and checking. So citing data is something that I really, really want to encourage people to do, because that gives benefits that encourage data producers to publish their data and to make their data open, but primarily publish it. So one of the things journal editors and journal publishers are doing is we're wanting to promote the use of data availability statements. Obviously, we want to make it possible for data producers to share their data and get credit for it. That's really important for all the reasons I've mentioned before. The data availability statement in a journal article provides information about the data that was used in that article, which is in an easy to find place within the data or within the article itself. And the statement gives you a quick understanding of the data and code, where it can be found, how it was created, and you can provide links to the data sets and code, whether they're in a repository or on a project website or wherever, or whether they're less ideally on the lead author's hard drive and our data are available on request to the lead contact. And you also get some information about what the requirements are for accessing that data, whether you have to email the lead author or whether it's freely available in a digital repository and you just go to the link that's given with the DOI. And of course, we're trying to standardize the statement forms, so specific statements that allow for easy machine reading and automatic linking to the data sets too. Right, so I've been talking for nearly half an hour, so I'm going to skip very quickly through what was my backstory. So I started off doing radio propagation research, as I said, creating, analyzing data, produced lots of graphs. There we go. This was my data archive, and I was preserving it completely the wrong way. It was on file on a departmental server and also on CDs in my desk. Not in my desk drawer, on a shelf in my office. Not ideal, definitely don't do that. Had workflows and software. We published reports for our funding body and published academic papers, and massive amounts of data basically got converted into tables in a journal paper. So there we go. This was multiple years, many years. Anyway, good news is my historical data sets are now properly archived in the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis and have a DOI along with them. And I also was involved with the launch of worked with people to launch a data journal called the Geoscience Data Journal, which was funded by the Royal Meteorological Society. And I also wrote a data paper to cover it as well. So, so my research archive is now safely stored in a repository and has been documented with data articles as well. And of course, all of this was really hard work. And I think it's very important to remember that this was hard work, and that when we're asking researchers to do this data publication, we're asking them to do stuff that is extra work. It's really important, but as I said, they need to get the brownies and the brownie points and the cookies and the extra research funding and credit for doing all this hard work. And I've accidentally repeated a slide there, so I will skip that. I will finish up by just talking a little bit about patterns because I can. So I'll beg you a few moments of you for that. So Patterns is a journal which is all about data science. We have our first birthday issue going live at the beginning of next month in April. We've been publishing for a whole year, which is pretty impressive considering during that time we've all been involved in a global pandemic as well. So I consider that a very good thing that we've managed to achieve. And Patterns is basically everybody is using data, everybody is creating data, everybody, doesn't really matter what domain you're in, whether that's astronomy or zoology. People are having similar problems with dealing with data, no matter what domain they're in, and they're not, everybody's reinventing solutions to the same problems. So they're reinventing the wheel, and all these wheels are slightly different colors, slightly different shapes, slightly different axles, so they're not interoperable particularly well. So Patterns is attempting to bring together researchers, no matter what their area of research is, to be able to share their knowledge and understanding. And I pretty much said that already, I think. So bring together different groups of people, and these groups of people are in no particular order. The computer scientists and data scientists who are building the cool new algorithms and methods, the artificial intelligence systems, the machine learning, the cool new techniques, and they're often the ones who need data sets that are well defined, well understood, and well labeled in particular, and they're also looking out for the real world problems as well that they can apply these new techniques to. Then we've got the researchers in the data intensive domains who have the data and who have the real world problems and would really quite like to apply these cool new techniques. Physicists or researchers in the digital humanities, for instance. And then the third group, who historically haven't really got an awful lot of academic credit in terms of publications, are the data stewards and engineers, the people who are working in the background to build the infrastructures and also the policies too, to curate data and support people who are creating data and managing it. And a very important part of Patterns' aims and scope is talking about the impacts of data science on society as a whole, how data science can be used to make the world a better place, and how we can think about data not just as numbers in Excel spreadsheets, but also as, for example, real world people who are affected by the research that is done and the algorithms that are produced and the results that come out of machine learning algorithms and the like. Anyway, moving on, what do we publish? We publish original research in data science, as I said. We also publish descriptor articles, as I've mentioned earlier. yeah, it's all about sharing data science solutions across domain boundaries. We also publish opinion pieces, reviews, tutorials, perspectives. Perspectives seem to be very popular because they're a way for authors to say, this is the situation in one field and this is what we think should be done about it. So yeah, I will skip over this just to reiterate that it's all about applying data science techniques to a domain. Doesn't really matter what that original domain is. We're all about sharing your data story as well. That's kind of our tagline. So we're interested very much in the personal side of data science, the people behind the data, the stories, the things that went wrong or not so right, and that other people can learn from. And it's fundamentally, as I said at the very beginning, we publish because we want to share data and understanding. I will give a quick overview. We've because we are addressing such a broad field of people with quite a wide and varied understanding of different topics. We've got this thing called the data science maturity levels, which are basically just a handy way of going, how mature is this particular concept or this thing that's being presented in this article? Is it at a concept? Here is a really cool idea. Or has it actually been implemented in one particular field, in which case, great. Or is it actually something really, really mainstream? Does everybody use it? In which case, brilliant. That's just a way for the readers to actually have a look at the articles and have a quick glance and go, oh, right, okay, so this is just a concept. So this hasn't actually been implemented yet. If I'm looking for a problem or a solution to my particular problem, then I'd probably be looking for something at the development or production sort of levels. Anyway, grand. To kind of attempt to bring all that together and summarize, I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done over a lot of years. And I think data publishing is really starting to come into people's consciousness as a thing that can be done and should be done. And I don't think I'm not being controversial at all by saying that data are massively important, not only to science but to the entire world, basically, especially in situations I think we've seen with the COVID pandemic, how important data and data science actually are to understanding what's going on in the world around us. Excuse me. So yeah, so data are massively important. And fundamentally, we've got to remember that conclusions and knowledge are only as good as the data that they're based on. And we do science because we want to find out about our world, which is brilliant. And science works as a method of building and developing and our understanding and coming up with new techniques and technologies. And science works like that because science is reproducible and verifiable, and because we share what we've learned with each other. And that includes, we should be sharing data and software and methodologies and workflows and all that sort of stuff as well. And it's up for us to care for those things, to ensure the story of what we did with those things is transparent, so that others can use the data and the software again. And it's not just others, it's also us in the future. 20 years from now, if we have a well-described data set, then we can go back to it and go, oh yes, I remember what I was doing then, rather than going, oh God, and trying to find the lab notebooks that have disappeared somewhere into a cupboard. It's also really important for verifiability, to have that trustworthiness in our reproducibility. And yeah, this is hard work. It's asking an awful lot of researchers and an awful lot of people to do this, and that's okay. And we need to acknowledge the fact that it's hard work and give people credit for their work in doing this. So that pretty much sums up my presentation. I'd just like to leave you with a quick plug in that I am always delighted to talk to people about their cool new data science. So if you have any thoughts on any articles that you would like to talk to me about, then please do drop me an email, ping me on Twitter or whatever. I'd be absolutely thrilled to have a chat with you. And my final summing up thought is just that, as was said by Graham Steele, publishing research without data is simply advertising, not science.